Hello everyone, it's me, Coffee Stitcher, with blue hair today, which shows up a lot better in person than it's showing up here, but it's blue. How's everybody's week been? Awesome, that's great to hear. I had a fairly good week myself. Good coffee. And I've got lots to show. And so, of course, we've got my usual Q&A. No haul this week, but then we'll just dive on right to what we did do. So, yes, let's get started. So the first question comes from Stitch Roadie. And she says, sorry if this was already asked, but what fabric did you use for Emerald City? And I believe it's called Fairy Dust by from Hand Dyed by Stephanie. It's either Fairy Dust or Fairy Wings, but I think it's Fairy Dust. That's what's standing out. I lost the little card thing that came with it, so I don't know at this point anymore. But I think it's Fairy Dust. Props to everyone who got the Miss Slocum reference. Jinmal asks, how do you plan to FFO your Emerald City? It will probably be framed. It's one that I feel really justifies framing. But then again, I feel that way about all of my Oz designs. So... Climbing Stitcher asks, any tips for beading and backstitching a Mira, especially the backstitch around the skin? My general rule of thumb with a Mira skin, because it's a lot of angles, is where I can go in without splitting the square is where I do my backstitch points to. And I backstitch before I bead. Because every once in a while you'll get one where, like, here's your backstitch, and there's a bead that has to go right here. So if you've already beaded, then you've got this weird thing you've got to figure out with your backstitch, whereas you can just bead straight over the stitch as need be. So hopefully that helps. Christy Martin says, I see all the books over your shoulder. What type of books do you read? These are kind of my classic Kidlit collection. It's a bunch of Oz, but then there's also Mary Poppins, The Secret Garden, Winnie the Pooh, the Narnia books, and the series of Unfortunate Events. Yes. So that's what's up there. I read a mixture of things. I like literary nonfiction, especially if it's true crime. I like some biographies. Generally, it's got to be like old Hollywood or theater related. I really like making of books. So in terms of nonfiction, that's why I read. Regular fiction, it tends to be mostly like classics and young adult classics. Or sometimes cozy murders. Or at least as cozy as murder can be. Murder most foul. I do like Stephen King, though. Not as much as my husband, but I like Stephen King. And I really loved, actually, the book I read last year that I'm still raving about was Nosferatu by Joe Hill, who is Stephen King's son. And I did the audiobook, narrated by the divine Kate Mulgrew, and she was so terrifying that if it had been a physical copy of the book and I wasn't listening on my phone, it would have had to have gone into the freezer a time or two. Which props if you get that reference. Patricia Kasmerick, I was too. Stitching in Sequins asks a good question. She says, going off the question from last week regarding your pattern shopping habits, how about a parade of your patterns? P.S. Maybe I'll let you hold my heels. She's got a fabulous pair of glittery red heels that I am just drooling over. That's actually a really good idea. Today I'm on a little bit of a time crunch. We have a lunch at 12:30, so I wanted to make sure I could get my video done and up before we left. But that actually will probably be a good... I may do that next week. That sounds like a good idea. Hopefully I remember it next week. We'll see. But I'll try. Trisha, yes, yeah, Monday was a bank holiday for me for Indigenous Peoples Day. And yes, it was very nice. Karen Lynch, I'm jealous that you met Mr. Humphreys. And I love most of that original first group. And I liked the second group. I didn't like when Mr. Lucas left, and I'm blanking on what the guy who replaced him was. I didn't like him as well as I liked Mr. Lucas. And I even like Being Served Again, / Grace and Favor, depending on which country you live in. Although I missed having Mrs. Slocum's hair for that. Isabel's Moments with Crafts asks, do you prefer linen or even weave? What size needles do you use? And have you ever thought about stitching a full coverage Haid? So first, to answer your question, I don't really prefer linen or even weave one over the other. I have a preference amongst my even weaves. I prefer Joblin to Lugana. Although I don't mind Monaco, but Joblin is definitely my preference, because I like that it feels like a blanket. And linen-wise, I prefer 28 or 32. And in linen, I'm very particular about my brands. I don't like Weeks Dye Works. It's too open and loose. Same with R&R Reproductions. The needles I primarily use a 28 Petite from John James. I'll use a 26 if I've got to use a pearl or something that's a little thicker. Then I'll use a 26, but I prefer a 28. And I have thought about stitching a full coverage Haid, but I don't enjoy full coverage. I learned that back when I first started stitching, that I don't enjoy that all that much. So, thought about it, yes. Will I do it? Highly doubtful. You just don't see enough progress fast enough for my tastes. Sarah Grenier, I will not speak about my cat for the moment. Luann Scott asks if I know my floss conversion for the Tempting Tangles Great Cheshire Pumpkin, which I keep calling Cheshire Moon for some reason. But it's Great Cheshire Pumpkin. I have it written down. It was primarily done, sort of cobbled together from a list Eric made and sent floss for, and then there were some I had to tweak. There were a couple of colors that I had to change the symbol a time or two on. So it's really not one I would be able to share successfully. And a couple of the colors I used were like limited edition to that specific time frame. So they were like a floss of the month, and they aren't available anymore. So I really don't have one that I can share with you. And that takes us to the end of the Q&A. What? All right, so this week's homework, I basically got completed on the first day. Yay, holidays. So, for the Religio Jinx, we had to do 200 stitches in purple. So I worked on Jack's Halloween Dream from the Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery. And I enjoyed it much more than working on the letters. Those letters are killer. But here's where I'm at on it. So, and it's a little hard to see. It shows up much better in person, but I did 200 purple. And the bat below the H, that whole section's actually a half stitch over. I miscounted a little bit. I didn't realize it, but you can't really tell. So, and this is on Brigid from Under the Sea Fabrics. So there were my 200 on that. Let's see, then I did... We're going to skip around a little. For food treats, I worked on Universal Monsters. There is, down in the Wolfman section, there's hanks of meat, and it had to be a food we could gift. I ended up not using it for that. I couldn't bring myself to do it. But I did manage to finish the tower here, as well as the ghost and 2 little bats. So we're going to keep... This one's coming out again this week, so I'm going to keep working over here on it. I've got a ghost to do, and then I'm going to try and maybe finish in all of this side before we move on to this side of the mansion. And this is on Nessie by Under the Sea Fabrics. So there were 200... I did technically 201 stitches. Then I did 400 stitches on Jenny Bean. I used that for my Dark Arts Curse. I feel it's cursed because I kept losing my black floss for it. And then I also used it for Grandparents' House, stitch 200 stitches on a human house. So I finished all the black in the house. I got the roof done, and I got I got the front half done, so I've still got to do the windows and the oatmeal. And then I'll start filling in the house, which is going to be exciting. I really like this one. And this one's on, I think, Desert Sand from Zweigert. Trying to make sure I leave the ones that are coming back out to play this week accessible. Then I had exactly 600 stitches left on Cheshire Pumpkin after my stitching day on Sunday with it. So, it got finished. I used it for Tom's Trophies, 200 stitches on one I think I would win a trophy for. I did 200 stitches on something I collect. There's a witch that's flying, and I collect Wizard of Oz. And then Voldemort is Afraid to Die, so this was a piece I didn't want to end, and I didn't, because it was a lot of fun. And here it is! Ta-da! The corn was actually kind of fun, because it was a sort of green and purple variegated, so it gives it sort of, and the reason I kind of went for it, one was it gave it sort of a more realistic feel, and when you buy asparagus in the store, sometimes it's purple. And I thought, okay, well, I'll get on board with that. So that was what was basically left. So there we go. It's got all sorts of really cool parts to it. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend doing it. But yeah, all done. Spooky. And it also is my first Instagram post to ever hit 1,000 likes. Like, it is by far my most liked Instagram post in the history of Instagram for me. And holy jeez, like I said, it's actually well over 1,000 now, and that's just so cool, and I think it's so neat that you all liked it that much. So thank you to everyone who liked it. That definitely helped make my week. So, yeah. Alright, so for next week's homework, I am going to have to break Darktober. I just can't do Darktober and fit all the prompts. Oh, I didn't show you what else I worked on. So, I worked some the other day on Nevermore. So I did the path, which is Old Covered Bridge. I used and I did that also for the ground. It'll be my ground or back stitching. Soot for the fence, and then I'm using Blackboard, or maybe it's Blackbird. It's one of the two. From Gentle Arts for the raven and the words Nevermore. And then I've got to pick the colors. I was looking at them last night, and I picked 2 colors that are way too similar for the graves, so I've got to figure something different out for them. But, yeah. So I'm really enjoying this with all of its color swaps. I did work a little yesterday morning because I just wanted something that was already on hand. I did work on my Woodland Fairy. I'll be working on her today after the video. We're going to finish up this ribbon and then start in on the tree branch, which is going to be exciting. And then I'm going to do the tree branch. I'm going to have to backstitch the leaf things first because I don't think there's going to be a way I can safely count to get to the leaves. So I'd feel better backstitching it first. So we'll work on that today. And then I also did more on Pennywise and Georgie, which will segue me into the homework for the week. So here is where I'm at. I got Georgie done. So I'm about a third of the way through. And yes, that is a Carol Channing needlebinder, because I love her. All right, so this week's homework is all 200 stitches. Oh, and I forgot to look at the bonus. What is the bonus? Oh, stitch on something with a necklace. I'm going to have to hunt around because I don't know of anything offhand that has a necklace in it. Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow, so the first one is trusting each other was key, because this is when Dumbledore and Harry go to that cave at towards the end of Half-Blood Prince to retrieve the Horcrux, which is the locket. So it's trust. So stitch on a pattern that you were unsure of, but continue trusting the pattern, and that's definitely it. Because some of the colors I'm looking at, and I'm going, not sure this is going to work. But it's worked okay so far. So 200 stitches on that one. For the cave, we're supposed to stitch on something with an entryway, which is going to be, for me, Nevermore, because there's an entry to the house here. Oop. We've got one, we could either stitch Warmth Light or Cold Dark for Sunlight and the Inferi. So I'm picking Cold and Dark, and I'm going to work on Jenny Bean, which you saw where I'm at on that. It's got to be 200 stitches. And the reason I picked that one was because the poem on it is a little dark, and it's got a graveyard. But the poem says, where is my cover sheet for it? Where's my cover picture for it? Where is my cover picture for it? That's my working copy. Is this it? There it is. Says, when I am dead and in my grave and all my bones are rotten, if this you see, pray think of me, or I will be forgotten. So I thought that sort of did the cold, dark thing very well. The next one is Sectum Sempra, which is the spell. It's a cutting spell. It's a very dangerous cutting spell. We're supposed to work on a project that is in parts that form a piece. So I'm using Words to Live By from Tiny Modernist, because even though it's a sal, you could stitch all of the parts individually and it would still work. So that's where I'm at on it. So we'll do 200 stitches on it. Right. Then boat, we have to, because we travel by boat, we've got to use, we have to use a letter N. So I'm going to be working on one of two. I haven't decided which I'm going to do. It's going to depend on my mood when I get to that point. Pieces need to go in here. But I'm either going to work on Corner of the World by Tempting Tangles. So that's where I am on that. Or, because T for Tempting Tangles. Or I'll work on Pride and Prejudice. Because I determined, what was it? I figured out how to make that one work. I think it's the designer's last name. Or I'll work on Pride and Prejudice. Because her name is Kristen Ashley is the designer. So, and I'm really ready to get back to working on this one. And then, last but not least, is Aguamenti. It's the spell that creates water, because Dumbledore kept needing water while he was drinking the poison. So I'll be working on Universal Monsters, because there's the water here. So 200 stitches on Universal Monsters. And then the bonus is to stitch on something with a necklace. And I'm not sure I have anything with a necklace in it. Because Woodland Fairy doesn't wear a necklace. I may not have anything with a necklace. We'll have to see. I'll look. Oh, maybe one of the fairy tale characters in that Shannon Christine has a necklace on. That might work. Someone's probably posted a picture of that I can see. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some looking. It's completely and totally possible that I may not be able to do the bonus one this week because I can't stitch. You can't do penalty stitches on that. So yeah. Let's see. Try and pull up a picture of it. Oh, maybe not. Maybe there isn't anyone that's got a necklace on, because their hair covers where their necks would be. So, yeah, okay. Well, that's not going to work. So we'll figure something out. Maybe, kind of, sort of. Anyhow, that's it for me today. I will see you all next week. If you've got questions, give me a shout. Bye.